It's time to get smoking with Huff Daddy, and today we're talking about brisket. So my way of doing brisket is pretty much a Texas style brisket, low and slow with minimal rubs, salt and pepper, garlic, or maybe just one of your favorite rubs is how I want to go. But I want to talk to you today about first choosing the right brisket. So what you can see here is I have about a 15-pound brisket. It's a whole packer brisket. This being the point end, the burnt ends come from here, chopped brisket from this side, and then of course your slices come from the flat. And one tip I wanted to give you is when you're buying your brisket, I personally shop at Costco because they have prime brisket here in Oklahoma for $3.50 a pound. And if you can get prime for $3.50 or choice for $3, you're going to want to get prime so you can get the marbling. It's the fat inside the meat that matter with keeping your brisket moist, not the fat on the outside. In fact, when I get to trimming, you'll see that I trim the majority of mine off. But you want to buy a prime brisket. You want to look for marbling on the brisket that looks like this, where the fat goes throughout the muscle fibers and you've got real good marbling here. You also want to try to get a brisket that's as uniform as can be with the fat or the flat end as it tapers down. You want it to try to stay relatively thick. Otherwise this part's going to dry out faster in the smoker. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start trimming the fat off here. I'm not going to do the trim on the video. I'll do an entire another video that shows you how to trim the brisket. But what I'm going to do is trim this off camera and show you how I like to trim it up and what I've done to it so you can get a look at it, and we'll go from there. So I'll be right back. Okay, I've got the brisket trimmed up here. Before I show you the brisket, I did want to give you a few tips. One on selecting the brisket, besides the marbling that I talked about. Most people don't realize that you actually want to buy a brisket that's as close to the use by date as possible. Chicken and pork, you want that to be as far away. So you want it to be 3 weeks away from expiring, or 2 weeks, or whatever you can get. As long as you're buying a whole packer brisket that's still in the cryovac or the vacuum sealed bag that comes from the meat supplier, you actually want a brisket that is as close to the best by date, because what it does is it wet ages inside the bag. So for instance, today is October 29th, and this brisket actually said used by October 26th. So I bought it early and left it in my fridge and just let it in the bag so it could continue to age through the wet age, and that's going to help with flavor and tenderness. So don't get worried if the brisket is actually a couple days over the use by date. That's actually perfect. That's what you want. The other thing is, I can tell you this is a curved boning knife. It's critical to have the right tool when you're going to trim a brisket. There's a lot of fat, a lot of silver skin, a lot of things you're going to want to get through. And a sharp knife, I like one with this curve here to help you maneuver in the brisket. You definitely want a sharp boning knife if at all possible. Keep it sharp, keep it good to go. Okay? So as you can see here with the brisket, I try to get about a 1/4 inch of fat on this fat cap side all the way down. You could take it all the way down if you wanted to, but this isn't a competition brisket. This is just cooking on the backyard smoker for our own enjoyment. So here's about a 1/4 inch of fat that I trimmed out. I also took most of the fat channel that runs here between the flat. You can see the flat running this way. This is where you get your lean slices, and then here's the point, and you can see it's going the other way with the muscle fibers. This is that fatty piece, and I've taken pretty far down with the knife and trimmed down in here and removed a lot of that hard fat so you can see where the flat and the point are going to separate after the cooking process. I like to do this for a couple reasons. One, you can get a lot of extra rub on here if you take out that fat channel. Two, the less fat you have in there that's hard, if you get rid of that up front, the less of it's going to break down and make your smoker all greasy in the bottom. That's really not doing anything for the meat. And it also cuts down on your cooking time, because you're talking about trying to get a nice uniform even thickness piece of meat so it will cook evenly in the smoker. And if you can remove a lot of that hard fat inside there and have it lay pretty flat, it's going to help with smoke flow over the top of the meat. It's also going to help with the cook time. So here's the final product, trimmed up pretty good, pretty uniform all the way around, a little bit of separation but not completely, and we're ready to get this rubbed up. Okay, we're back. Got a little ahead of myself on that last take. I forgot that we're going to be injecting this brisket before we rub it down. So I'm using a couple of products here today. First, when I do my injection, I always use Butcher Barbecue Prime Brisket Injection. Several reasons I use this. First off, I'm one of the embedded correspondents on the Barbecue Central show, which is on every Tuesday night from 8 to 10 Central Time. It's thebbqcentralshow.com or on Facebook at BBQ Central Show. But it's from 8 to 10 every Tuesday night with Greg Rimpey, and Butcher's Barbecue is a sponsor of the show. Dave Bosca is from here in Oklahoma. I like to use Oklahoma products. And if you're wondering if his stuff is good, I can tell you that he just took Grand Champion at the 2018 Jack Daniels. So, and he uses his products obviously, so that's the way to go. I'm gonna be using award-winning products when I do my barbecue. So congratulations to Dave Bosca. So this is Butcher's Barbecue I'm gonna be injecting with. And then this has saved me so many times. You can certainly just get your basic injection needle, but if you're ever doing multiple briskets or pork butts or injecting for large quantities, this is Chop's Power Injector. You mix this with water, put it in the injector, you give some pumps here to pump it up, and then you have a power injection and you're ready to go. So that's the only way to inject the brisket. So, got this ready, got this pumped up. I like to inject in the direction of the grain. So look at the way your muscle fibers are going, and then you just go pretty evenly across here. And I don't know if you can see this, but once I inject this, you'll be able to watch. The meat's just gonna pump up. You see that motion there? You wanna put as much injection in there as the meat can handle. But you can see it just pumping up like a balloon getting filled with air, except what you're injecting is flavor and you're injecting moisture. So this injection is going to help keep the brisket moist throughout the cook, and it's also gonna give it a great flavor. And you don't wanna go too far in. You definitely are gonna get some leakers. As you fill it up, that's how you know that you've got as much as it can hold if it starts squirting out there. But you just wanna go all through the brisket, specifically the flat, you know, just spreading it out as much as you can, wiggling it around. Again, if you don't have a power injector, you'll be doing this, it'll just take you a little longer with the basic injection needle. But I think it's a pretty critical step in trying to keep your brisket moist. You can flip it over and go on the point if you want to. The point's got a lot of extra fat in it. It's not gonna dry out nearly as quick as the flat, but I like to just, for consistency, you know, inject it a few times here and there on the point as well, just to get that flavor in there. Wow. I mean, I don't know if you can see that, but that took a lot of liquid there and just pumped up like a balloon. So I got a couple more briskets that I'm injecting here, and then we'll be putting the rub on. So catch you in just a second. Okay, it's time to put the rub on. Super top secret, very complicated recipe, what I use for my rub, but I'm going to go ahead and share it with you. Kosher salt and black pepper. That's it. That's what they call black and white rub. They use it all over down in Texas. It's what Aaron Franklin uses on his briskets. You can maybe put a little bit of garlic powder in there if you want, but that's all I use. Kosher salt, coarse ground pepper. You want to give it a shake as you're applying it to keep an even distribution of the salt and the pepper. But you're just going to want to put this on here. Not quite as much as you would a rub that's a little finer. But you're going to want to give it a pretty thorough coating. There you go. And then of course, lift this up, dump it on the underside of the meat here. That's why I like getting a little bit of separation between the flat and the point. Now, not quite as critical on this side. However, there's definitely some exposed meat here. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a good dusting there as well. All right, looking pretty good. I'll get it on the sides, get my other briskets rubbed as well, and then get ready to go on the smoker. So I would usually record this part outside, but it's getting darker now earlier in Oklahoma. So just to make sure we have good lighting, I wanted to go ahead and talk to you about cook time, temperature, low and slow or hot and fast. and then fat side up, fat side down, as well as wrapping, right? So those are all questions about brisket cook. And really the answer is you got to test it out for yourself. There's preferences. Everyone has preferences. I have some really good brisket cooks that are friends. They cook different than me and it works for them. So generally speaking, I'm going anywhere between 225 and 275 degrees. I can see fairly consistent results really across the whole time. If I'm trying to speed up the cook, I might cook it at 275. Might not get quite the smoke flavor. 275 on a pellet grill especially burns a little hotter, and it doesn't get quite as much smoke. 225, you're going to get more smoke, but you're going to add a considerable amount of time to your cook time. As far as fat side up or fat side down, I prefer to do fat side down, and the reason being is I want that bottom of the meat to be protected from the heat source coming up directly, plus all that fat as it cooks off, it's going to drip down. Again, the fat on the outside of the meat has nothing to do with keeping the meat moist. If anything, if you turn it up and it bastes over the side, you're going to affect your rub and your bark on the outside. So I prefer to cook fat side down. And finally, whether or not you want to wrap the brisket or not wrap the brisket. So I usually tell beginners to wrap in foil. The most important thing about the brisket is to keep it the right tenderness and the right amount of moisture. Foil is going to help with that. You're going to lose a little bit of bark, but as you develop your brisket skills, your barbecue skills, you can use butcher paper. That's what I prefer to use most of the time is butcher paper. The steam will let out, but it keeps the oil, a nice greasy blanket, if you will, on top of the meat to help keep the meat tender, but the steam escapes and you get a nice bark. For this particular cook, I'm actually cooking for a catering event, a friend's birthday party, and I want to save the juice. My friend Doug Scheiding, my Texas barbecue correspondent colleague on the Barbecue Central show, gave me this suggestion of keeping the juice, wrapping in foil so you don't lose all of that like you would in butcher paper, and then allowing, separating the fat and taking that good au jus or juice and putting it on the meat after you slice it and help keeping it moist. So that's what I'm going to be doing this particular cook. Typically I would do butcher paper, fat side down, and then somewhere between 225 and 250 on the cook. But enough about talking, let's go put it on the smoker. All right, so it's about midnight. I'm putting this on to smoke all day. The party's gonna be at 6 o'clock tomorrow, or today technically, but I want to give it time to rest. I'm expecting these to take about 12 to 14 hours based on their size. So if I put them on at midnight, should be pulling them around 2 or 3. That'll give them time to rest and slice up. So you can see here, we've got it injected. We've got the rub on. I'm gonna put it this side down, fat side down. And what you wanna do is make sure the heavy end, the point, the thick end with all the fat goes towards your flame source. So you're gonna put it fat side down with this towards your flame. I'm cooking 3 of them, so I'm gonna try to spread it out pretty equally within the pit. I have my Yoder YS 1500. It's gonna be going on about 225 degrees and it should smoke through the night. And the beautiful thing about a pellet smoker, I can go in, go to sleep. Once I set my temperature where I want it, I know that it's gonna maintain all through the night without me having to tend the fire. And then I'm gonna come out in the morning, check on the brisket. I'm gonna be looking for the right color, probably internal temperature around 165. Once I hit that and I get a nice mahogany on the outside, then we're gonna be ready to wrap. For this one, I'm gonna be using a mix of cherry and pecan for my wood. Use whatever you want, post oak, hickory, all pecan, whatever. As long as it's a flavor that you like, go for it. So I'm gonna put these on and we'll be back in the morning. All right, it's about 7:30. So I got a good 7.5 hours of sleep while my Yoder did its thing. I've been running all night at about 220, 225. And it's time to check the brisket. So what I'm looking for here is a really nice mahogany color. I want it to be somewhere in the 165 range, and that's right about the time it's going to hit something called the stall or the wall, and that's when the fat breaks down in the meat, essentially basting itself like it would be sweating and cooling itself off, so you can hit the stall and just sit there while the meat doesn't rise in temperature for hours at a time. And that's one of the things that wrapping will help with. Again, typically I would wrap with butcher paper, but here I'm going to be using foil because I really want to hold on to that juice and use that to serve the meat to help keep that meat moist and warm. So here we go. All right, really good color here on this brisket. Got 3 of them in here plus a pork butt. So that's what I'm looking for, is that mahogany color. And again, I'm looking for somewhere around, 160, maybe even a little more. It looks like I'm right around 160 here on this one. So and checking this one, yeah, I'm around 160 there too. You could let them go up even a little further if you wanted to, but these look good. I'm happy with the color. I'm going to go ahead and wrap these in heavy-duty aluminum foil and put them back on the smoke. Okay, got all 3 of them wrapped really tightly in heavy-duty aluminum foil. You went ahead and did a double wrap to make sure I hold in that juice. I'm gonna wrap that pork butt too, but all 3 briskets are there. And now we're gonna let them cook until we're reaching, probably an internal temperature of about 200, 203. And we're gonna be checking it with a probe and making sure that we've got very little resistance with the meat. It's probably gonna be another 4 hours or so. So we'll be back. Okay, I got construction going on at my neighbor's house, so it's a little loud outside. But I wanted to go ahead and show you the smaller the brisket. It's been about 3 hours and 15 minutes since I wrapped them, and the smaller of the brisket was done. So what I like to do here is bring it in, open up the foil, and let some of that steam out. So that way it doesn't continue to cook. You can see still real nice color, real good bark. 203, that's pretty good. I'm getting very little resistance when I put the probe in. Everywhere I go, especially in the point. So we're looking good here. Lots of juice, plenty of juice. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap this back up. I'm gonna stick it in an ice chest, and I'm actually gonna let it set for about 3 or 4 hours before I slice it. So good to go here. I'll pull the other ones off when they hit the same temperature and the same tenderness, and we'll be good. All right, here's the final product. It's been resting in the cooler for about 3 hours. It just sits there and continues to tenderize. It doesn't overcook, but it reabsorbs all the juices. You can see here, when I separated a lot of that fat channel out, that gives you a good indication of where the point and the flat are. So that way, you can just take your knife right down through here and separate the point from the flat. So here's the point. I'm gonna set that aside, and then I'm gonna slice the flat. Now what you wanna do, you can see the grain of the meat running this way. You wanna go against the grain, and you wanna go about a pencil thick slice. So like this. And what you want is for it to bend over your finger, so there's a lot of texture or a lot of tenderness to it, but when you pull it, you want it to come apart pretty easily, just like that. You don't want it falling apart, that's an overcooked brisket, but you do want it to tear apart easily. Now on the point, obviously that's a lot more fat in there. You can slice that as well, or you can chop this up as chopped brisket, or of course cube this up and put it back in the smoker for burn ends. But that's another video. Okay, well, any questions, you can contact me on my Facebook page or on my YouTube channel, as you can see down below. Also listen to me and the other embedded correspondents for the Barbecue Central show on Tuesday nights. And I thank you for watching the brisket episode of Huff Daddy BBQ, and see you later.